In 1933, Felix Cohen accepted the invitation of his friend, a family friend, Nathan Margold, also Jew, as the new solicitor of the Department of the Interior, to help draft the Indian Reorganization Act. The act was meant to stop the policy of allotment of the 19th century, which tried to sort of break Indian tribes and give reservation lands to individuals. That was the policy of allotment of the 19th century. The new act, the Indian Reorganization Act, was trying to give tribes back their sovereignty over their economic, political, and cultural affairs. This is known in the history of federal Indian law as the Indian New Deal. Interestingly, Cohen knew nothing about Indian affairs when he joined the Department of the Interior. Influenced by Norman Thomas socialism on the one hand and pluralism on the other, he saw Indian tribes as one of those many political and economic groups that would form the foundation of the modern pluralist state. He used his work on Indian reservations as a model for other groups to follow. But Indian tribes were slightly different. Unlike labor unions and corporations that were the model for many other legal pluralists, Indian tribes were also ethnic and cultural groups with their own values, modes of life, ethics. When the Indian Reorganization Act basically failed, Cohen quickly realized that he needs to account or accommodate the particular cultures of Indian tribes. Other legal pluralists and legal realists may have been able to evade the race and ethnicity issue until much later, but Cohen was forced to address it. Gradually, his legal pluralist vision, as well as his understanding of his own place as a Jewish American, as a Jewish American, changed. And I don't have much time to talk about that, but I do want to indicate that his transformation takes place just as a series of developments beginning in the late 19th centuries redirects the attention of American scholars from collective entities to the individual as the unit of legal and political analysis. We start with Keynesian economics, which puts the individual consumer as the foundation of economic thought. At the same time, growing fears about what's going on in Europe, communism, totalitarianism, constitutional law scholars begin to obsess about the need to protect the rights of ethnic and racial minorities. While the early New Deal policies emphasized the individual right to work, to livelihood, to social insurance, to economic independence, all those ideals that were compatible with collective rights, legal scholarship from the late 1930s was concerned with the rights of individuals to be different. The legal pluralist vision of the state and its collectivist undertones was basically abandoned. But Jews did not abandon it so quickly. And I don't have, as I said, time to go into a lot of detail, but I do want to talk about one experiment. Felix Cohen, by the way, continued to push for group rights throughout the 1940s and 50s. He died, unfortunately, when he was 46 in 1953. His work was basically focusing on the rights of Native Americans and Alaska Natives to their lands, waters, natural resources, and he was trying to claim that they have ownership or at least occupancy rights despite the different structure of their occupancy and ownership. Others used the pluralist vision as a model for the reconstruction of post-war Europe and a new world. And I'm referring here to Abraham Weinfeld publication, Toward a United States of Europe. And briefly, this is what it said. The idea was that we'll take European countries and basically everyone will adopt some sort of a Bill of Rights. So that's very common, typically American. More important, it was expected that every national minority in a European state would be organized as a public corporation, empowered to own property, make contracts, sue and be sued in courts, and tax its members. The membership of each corporation would consist of all persons who, at the time of the census, had declared themselves to be members of the minority nation. Individuals' declaration would also bind their children until they're 21, and then they can choose. If they leave, they actually have to pay their overdue, accrued dues. The corporation of the different national groups and their members would be treated equally, would be given fair opportunity to develop their social, cultural, educational institutions. They would have self-government within their over their cultural activities. Each minority would elect a legislative body authorized to legislate within the limited sphere of cultural activities, and an executive body to execute the laws and administer the affairs of the minority. The public corporation would also set up courts to deal with disputes among members, and the language of minority group that composed 5% or more of the population of a state would be the official language. It should be used in courts, in all dealings, and in all other dealings with government authorities. It was assumed that the rights of all minorities would be guaranteed by the federal constitution, but it was recommended that an administrative body, a National Minorities Commission, be established to receive all minority complaints in the first instance, hold hearings, and render decisions appealable to federal courts. Special consideration was given to Jews, who were considered both a national minority and a religious group. It was decided that they can basically choose where they wanted to fall, and while religious Jews would enjoy religious freedom, the national Jews can have their own corporation. It was anticipated that Jews would actually choose to be both at the very beginning. This is sort of the end, I think, of pluralism. The United Nations Charter did not endorse any such plan, and discussions of civil rights and liberties in the United States in the post-war years also, to some respect, failed to address the special status of minority groups. Individuals became equal, and special treatment of groups became somewhat suspect. The Jews didn't give up necessarily. As I how am I doing on time?
You're pretty much.
I'm pretty much done. Okay, take a couple more minutes. Okay. I think the quote at the beginning of my talk about Felix Cohen, who of us is not a member of some minority, is his last attempt to call for a more substantive understanding of democracy and the relationship between minorities. It also is basically his sort of saying, you know what, law cannot really help us create a structure for minority groups. Let's just try to use law to learn about intolerance and prejudice. And that's what he's doing in his last years. Other Jews, we have Horace Kellan in 1956, recreating cultural pluralism as the American ideal, and several others. And of course, by the 1960s and 70s, growing numbers of scholars endorsed this idea. So I think, there's a moment in the late 30s, 40s, 50s that the idea disappears a little bit, but I think the story of legal pluralism, especially the Jewish legal scholars that sort of helped to keep it alive, is the story of the foundation of many of our contemporary debates, and I'll stop at that. Thank you.